Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Committee. In the absence of the Chair and Vice Chair, it is necessary to nominate a Chair for this meeting. Please could I have a nomination for Chair and a seconder?
Could I nominate Councillor Simon Clark?
And a seconder, please. Any other nominations? Please could you vote now then, please? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your vote of confidence in putting me in the chair this evening, members. Well, good evening, members, officers, visitors and members of the public. I'm Councillor Simon Clark and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. The meeting will be recorded and proceedings will be conducted in accordance with the Council's constitution, including procedural rules which are available on the Council's website. Now, firstly, I'll take you through the emergency evacuation procedure. There is no fire drill planned for this evening, so if the fire alarm does go off, take it as a real emergency. Exits there to my right or back out by the lifts, but please do not use the lifts. On exiting, you will be directed to the assembly point, and it is important that you remain there and do not return to the building until I have notified you it's safe to do so. If anyone present does need assistance in evacuating, could you inform me now? Thank you. Right, members must consider each application and everything that is said in the meeting concerning the application and make their decision based solely on their planning judgment and the information available to them. Following a decision by members, delegated authority is given to the planning officer to issue the decision notice. Planning permission is not granted or refused until the issue of that decision notice. Any member of the council who is not a member of the planning committee may attend as a visiting member and may speak, having given prior notice. Such visiting members may of course include ward members, and whilst visiting members can speak on an application, they are not permitted to vote. Any member of acting as a substitute on the planning committee must have undertaken the appropriate training to do so. Members must remain in the meeting for the whole time that each agenda item is being debated and should not vote on that item unless they have done so. I would now like to welcome our public speakers and remind you that you will have 3 minutes to speak and an audible warning time will be given when you have 30 seconds remaining. If the meeting is deferred to conduct a site meeting, you may speak both at the site meeting, at this meeting, at the site meeting, and also when it comes back to the planning committee. The meeting will follow the order set out in the agenda. However, I will amend the order if there is good reason to do so. In particular, I will take items where there are members of the public registered to speak first. Before moving on to the remainder of the agenda, and I will verbally reorder the agenda as appropriate. Right, so agenda item 2, apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Mike Baldock, who is substituted by Councillor Chris Palmer, from Councillor Hayden Braun, who is substituted by Councillor Angela Harrison, from Councillor Kieran Golding, who is substituted by Councillor Anne Kavanagh, from Councillor Elliot Jays, who is substituted by Councillor Derek Carnell, but he has since sent his apologies. From Councillor Ben J. Martin, who is substituted by Councillor Hannah Perkin. From Councillor Julian Speed, who is substituted by Councillor Lloyd Bowen, and from Councillor Claire Martin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philippa. So agenda item 3, to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of July, minutes 103 to 116 as a correct record. Members agreed? Thank you very much. I shall sign those shortly. Item 4, I'd like to invite members if they have any disclosable pecuniary interests or disclosable non-pecuniary interests. Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chairman. In my capacity as Chairman of Kent County Council Planning Applications Committee, I'm aware quite in depth of agenda item 2.1. I have been in dialogue with KCC officers on that application, but I have neither stated my acceptance or against the application. I come to this meeting with a clear and open mind. I will listen to the dialogue and will make my decision at the appropriate time, but it was worth noting, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Booth. Okay, so I would like to remind the meeting that where it is possible that a fair-minded and informed observer, having considered the facts, would conclude that there was a real possibility that a member might be predetermined or biased on any agenda item, the member should declare this possibility and then leave the room whilst that item is considered. So we move on to part B for the Planning Committee reports. To decide, to consider the attached header planning report. So I move on to then agenda item 2.1, which is 23/505-752 Full, land to the south of Ridham Avenue, east of Swale Way, Sittingbourne. Could I please invite the planning officer to provide a summary and update of the application, please?
Thank you, Chair. There are no updates to the officer report, so I'll proceed with my presentation. The approximately 4.7 hectare application site is broadly triangular in site and predominantly comprises open rough grassland. Kemsley Paper Mill is located to the north, beyond which there is further industrial development, whilst Swale Way, with a parallel overhead power lines, lies to the south and west, beyond which there is residential development, which is approximately 100 metres from the site. There is open land to the east. The land levels on the site fall by approximately 11 metres from the northwestern end of the site to the southeastern end. Castle Rough, a scheduled ancient monument, which, I don't know if you can see my cursor, which is located around there, and you can also see it on this area, the triangular, the rectangular area there. That's Castle Rough. There's a scheduled ancient monument situated to the east of the site. It is a medieval moated settlement site consisting of a waterlogged moat defining an island on which buildings of a manor would have stood. Its medieval buildings no longer exist above ground, but most of the remainder of the site survives to a great extent intact as buried deposits and earthworks. The feature is currently covered in dense scrub undergrowth and is thus not visually obvious or prominent in the area. Milton Creek Local Wildlife Site is located to the south of the site. The site is located within flood zone 1 and therefore has a low risk of flooding. There is an area to the south of the site within the applicant's control which predominantly lies within flood zones 2 and 3. The area is outside of the red line of the application site but is identified within a blue line on the site location plan, which you can see here. The area includes the Castle Rough site and it is proposed to accommodate landscaping and a footpath. It has been excluded from the application site to negate the requirement to undertake a sequential test, which would be required if any part of the site lay within flood zones 2 and 3. So I'll just take you through some, this is an aerial view of the site from the west with the paper mill. You can see to the north on this view with the Milton Creek Local Wildlife Site to the southeast. This is a photograph of the site looking northwest from Swale Way with the paper mill in the background. This is a view of the site looking west from Swale Way. Planning permission is sought for the construction of a battery energy storage facility to provide 249 megawatts of storage capacity, including electrical plant and equipment, landscaping and associated works. The proposal will include battery energy storage system units, power conversion system units and switch room units housed within containerised units, a substation compound comprising an enclosed supergrid transformer that steps up the electricity voltage prior to export to a Kelmsley substation, a main switch room, water tanks for fire water storage, welfare facilities and spare parts and maintenance, storage facilities. The primary access will be from Swale Way with an emergency access provided from Riddham Avenue. The layout of the proposed development responds to the constraints of the sloping site, with the battery units installed on a series of banks arranged broadly southwest to northeast. The container units will be similar in appearance and scale to a shipping container, which can be painted in a choice of colours to minimise the visual impact. The landscape planting within the blue line area to the south of the application site, which you can see on this landscape plan, will screen the development from the Castle Rough scheduled monument and mitigate the landscape impacts. A footpath is proposed to provide public access to an area overlooking the Castle Rough monument, which will feature an interpretation board to provide information. The landscaping, footpath, interpretation board and subsequent maintenance will be secured through a Section 106 agreement, as they will be located outside of the application site as identified in the red line. The proposed development is intended to assist the transition from fossil fuel-based electricity generation to renewable and low-carbon sources of generation. It will help address a key challenge associated with the intermittent supply from renewable energy sources such as wind and solar by providing the means to store and release electricity and thereby address fluctuations in supply and demand. The application site is located within the Sittingbourne built-up area boundary, is therefore considered suitable for development in line with the Swale settlement strategy. The application site is allocated for business use, and the proposed development would not bring forward the business use and accompanying employment and economic benefits sought through local plans policies CP1 and A2, and is therefore contrary to those policies. Outline planning permission was granted for an 8,000 square metre business park in July 2016. This scheme incorporated a number of measures to address the heritage and landscape constraints of the site, including a 13.3 hectare extension to the Milton Creek Country Park, extensive landscaping, a new footpath, visitor car parking and lower height buildings to minimise heritage and landscape impacts. The applicant advises that the marketing of the site has demonstrated that the delivery of the approved employment floor space at a value which was attractive to the market was unviable due to the abnormal costs associated with the necessary infrastructure, mitigation of heritage and landscape impacts, and removal of material from the site. The site has been allocated for business use in the emerging and then the adopted local plan for around 10 years, and has not been developed for its allocated use despite the grant of planning permission and against a backdrop of significant demand for business floor space. It is therefore reasonable to assume that the landowner would have been seeking to develop and therefore achieve a return on the site over this time period and made efforts to do so, including through obtaining planning permission. It is therefore considered that the information submitted regarding the viability and marketing of the site has some credibility and can be afforded some weight. The development of a local plan, including gathering the evidence to underpin its policies, is a long-term process. It should be noted that demand for these battery facilities has emerged relatively recently, and the need to accommodate such facilities was not considered through the local plan process and is unlikely to be currently reflected in local plans UK-wide. The proposal is an essential facility to support the UK's transition to renewable energy and energy security, and it needs to be accommodated. The proposal is supported by national strategy. These battery facilities do not benefit from a specific use class and can therefore only be accommodated on sites which are allocated for other uses or are not identified for development. The site has been identified as particularly suitable as it is located in close proximity to the point of connection to the national grid at Kemsley substation, whilst benefiting from excellent road access and separation to nearby residential development. The proposed development would not result in operational stage amenity impacts which would result from B-class uses such as those arising from increased traffic, noise and air pollution. The scheme will generate employment and economic benefits at construction stage and will support a small number of jobs relating to the operation and maintenance of the facility at operational stage. The proposal would not bring forward a business use in line with the site's allocation. However, it is accepted that there is some justification for the proposed use, which would deliver an essential piece of infrastructure to support the UK's transition to renewable energy. It is considered that the proposal can be supported in land use terms. The site is in a sensitive location from a landscape point of view, and the application is accompanied by a landscape and visual appraisal which identifies some minor landscape and visual effects and a moderate operational stage visual effect when viewed from Swale Way. The local plan acknowledges that development of the site will result in landscape impacts, and views of the development will generally be experienced in the context of existing large-scale heavy industry. Having regard to the context of the site, the height and scale of the proposed installations, along with the extensive landscape screening, it is considered that the landscape and visual effects of the development have been mitigated as far as possible, and there will be some generally minor adverse impacts in landscape and visual terms. The proposals include measures to mitigate the impact of the proposals on Castle Rough, involving mature tree planting with species that grow tall to ensure significant and long-term screening. Public access via footpath will be provided to a point overlooking Castle Rough, where an interpretation board will be installed. Historic England welcome the heritage benefits and advise that the public benefits of the proposal will need to be balanced against the residual, less than substantial harm identified to Castle Rough. These are set out in the officer report, and it is considered that the public benefits of the proposal outweigh the identified less than substantial harm. In character terms, the relatively low height of the containerised units enables an overall satisfactory degree of visual mitigation from the landscape screening to the south of the site. Having regard to the location and context of the site, it is considered that the proposed development would not result in a harmful impact in terms of character and appearance. Kent Fire and Rescue Service advised that the application is accompanied with sufficient information to align with relevant guidance. The emergency response plan provides sufficient outline information to demonstrate that a safe and effective emergency response can be provided. The proposed development is considered acceptable in terms of fire safety. As stated, the proposal is an essential facility to meet decarbonisation and net zero targets in the context of a climate and ecological emergency as declared by the Council. The proposed development would not result in harm to living conditions, and nor is it harmful in relation to the technical matters considered in the officer's report. The proposal is considered on balance to be acceptable, and it is recommended that planning permission be granted subject to conditions and a satisfactory completion of a legal agreement. There's a couple more slides here to show you the appearance of the containerised units, and then this shows a subsection of the a cross-section of the substation compound with the transformer units, which would feed in, then go underground and feed the power through to the Kelmsey substation. And this is a cross-section showing the switch room and again the transformer units. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greenwood. I'd now like to invite a public speaker, Mr. Mark Pearce, please. Take a seat there, and just see, no, in the front there, and just press the big button on the console. You'll have 3 minutes as I indicated, and you will get an audible warning when there's 30 seconds remaining.
Good evening, members of the Planning Committee. I'm speaking on behalf of Ooze Energy Limited. We are a specialist in developing battery storage and renewable energy systems. As the UK moves towards net zero, battery energy storage systems are a vital source of providing the energy security that we need. We know that renewable energy can be intermittent and unpredictable. Battery storage enables electricity to be stored at times when generation exceeds demand and then releases energy when demand next exceeds generation. We have identified this site as suitable for these proposals due to the transport links via Swale Way, adequate distance from residential areas, close proximity to the point of connection at the National Grid Kemsley substation, and the current allocation of the site for development. Alongside these criteria, the scheme will provide a variety of benefits: the creation of new jobs during construction phase and off-site support roles across the wider supply chain once the project is completed. Generate business rates for Swale Borough Council, helping to provide improved services for local residents. Significant landscaping and planting on site alongside the provision of an off-site path to Castle Rough. Our scheme is consistent with policy, has received no objections from statutory consultees and will not disrupt the local area. With our expertise in delivering schemes similar to this application across the UK and previously in Kent, this scheme is oven ready, and if approved tonight, we will deliver it. The scheme is an appropriate, economically viable and deliverable use of the site, overcoming the issues of delivery that have plagued this site through previous non-viable iterations, and is aligned with this Council's declaration of a climate and ecological emergency. I hope, therefore, that you will endorse the Officer's recommendation to approve this application so that we can help reach the UK's net zero target by utilising a brownfield site, storing and delivering enough power to supply all homes in Kemsley for up to 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearce. With nearly a minute to spare. Right, members, for the purposes of debate, I will move the officer's recommendation for approval.
Chair.
This isn't indicative of how my vote may take part. Going back to a previous chairman there, as Councillor Booth has recognised.
Chair, can I just make a point, Chair?
Councillor Palmer.
Just before this meeting, I had a call from Councillor Connell saying he wasn't very well and that he was going to email in his comments because he called in the application. I just wondered if he was able to do that from his sick bed.
I haven't personally received anything. Philip, have you received?
That's the only email I had, just
That bit. Yeah, okay. Right, so I've had a seconder, Councillor Booth. Thank you very much. Before opening up to debate, as the ward member one of the ward members who called it in, as indicated by Councillor Palmer, we do have a brief message from Councillor Carnell. I had a resident ask me to call it in as he had concerns about the fire risk of the site and also loss of commercial land. And that is Councillor Carnell's statement. For the sake of consistency, it is disappointing that Councillor Wise isn't here this evening, as he was the other ward councillor that called it in. However, I do now open up the agenda item to debate. Councillor Winklis.
Thank you, Chair. I know this area very well, living in Milton, and it's an area where I regularly take my dog for exercise. But in saying that, well, it's basically scrubland. As it stands, it doesn't really serve any purpose, in my view. It is quite close, I think, as the applicant said, to Swale Way for construction traffic to gain access if we're so minded to pass this tonight. If I can just clarify again with the officer, that the footpath will be either rerouted or maintained, you mentioned?
Yes, the footpath, we will secure the ongoing public access and maintenance through a Section 106 agreement that will be attached to the planning permission if planning permission is granted.
Thanks for that. As you also stated, there's been no objections to this other than one resident apparently had concerns to one of the local councillors. But I will go on to say there is just one thing that does concern me slightly, and that is the flood zone. You know, you stated that it's not a great flood zone area. It's in 2 or 3 categories, I understand. That does tend to flood at times with heavy rain. The whole of the Milton Country Park is under a floodplain. That is basically, as I understand, it's why it was never developed for housing in the past. But I am minded to go with the officer yourself on this. If we're minded to pass this tonight, I would like a condition put on the actual units to be green, so it blends in with the overall area of the country park and surrounding area. That's my comments on it. Thank you.
Is that a formal proposal, Councillor Winkler?
Sorry, that is a formal proposal. I've got a seconder, yeah.
Do I have a seconder for Councillor Winkler's proposal? Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Anyone wish to talk to Councillor Hunt?
I'll just talk to it because I know that the urban design officer also did say the same thing, and I wonder if it is already actually covered in there anyway. If you could just get clarification on that.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. So, all those in favour of Councillor Winkler's proposal? Sorry.
Can we get clarification first whether it's...
Oh, sorry. Can you clarify?
There's a condition already recommended. The details of the paint colour are submitted to and approved in writing, and the urban design officer has recommended that it be green.
So, thanks, Chair. So, therefore, I remove my seconding.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Do you wish to remove that proposal, Councillor Winkler?
I remove it. I missed it in the report. My apologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Richard Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's quite clear from the report. It's quite comprehensive and it covers all the concerns. I accept residents will have concerns about a possibility of a fire, but Kent Fire and Rescue don't seem to have that sort of concern, or they feel they've got that base all covered. I'm concerned at 8.3.12, and I've lost my place in my paperwork, but our own economic development officer has concerns about the loss of the land, and then the next couple of paragraphs talks about there's letters in. It would be nice, I think, they aren't on the portal, but it would be nice to see the evidence. But I also think when the economic development manager says there are reasons, or the economic growth is increasing, it would be nice to see a bit of evidence to support that statement. I mean, at the moment, I think if we was to refuse this, it would be on very flimsy grounds, and I'm minded to go with the officer's report, which I think has covered all the bases for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greenwood. Would you care to comment on the economic development officers?
Yes, I mean, as set out in the report, the economic development officer did raise some concerns about the loss of employment land, but also acknowledged the abnormal costs with bringing this particular site forward for employment use. Acknowledged that we haven't got, the evidence is more anecdotal than firm, but as set out in the officer report, we consider that the information that the applicant has provided regarding viability and marketability of the site for business use has some credibility and is accepted by officers.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, please.
Yeah, it's interesting that I'm hearing that people are quite pro this one, but the one in Graveney wasn't, when we were debating over a battery safety issue. And this one's very close to people, very, very close to people. There have been issues with them. But that aside, it was more the delivery of renewable energy. It doesn't produce any energy, it stores energy. So that's a key element. And technology is moving on for battery storage in that it should be multi-use. That just becomes static and just becomes a reservoir. So it doesn't have multi-use. So it's basically consuming the amount of cells needed for 4,000 regular EVs. That's a lot of EVs. Bearing in mind they can be used for battery storage. So if we legislate and lobby in a better way for government to change legislation to basically nationalise things and bring in a better approach to battery storage and use of electric vehicles, we won't need large corporate battery storage facilities. I'd just be intrigued to know. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. And I think they're the sort of main. Oh, the lifespan. I just wondered if you've got the lifespan on the outline.
I understand that it's at least 25 years, but potentially longer than that. At which time the units might need to be refreshed or renewed. That's my understanding of it.
25 years. Okay. But no, I just think that it's interesting that when it's in an area that's not as affluent and rural, it gets less notice than one that was in Graveney, that's all. So that's nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Perkin.
Thanks. Just a question, really. With the previous application for battery storage in Graveney, there was an accompanying battery safety management plan. Is that something that would come as a separate item to the committee?
Yes, a battery safety management plan will be secured by condition, and then that will be subject to consultation with Kent Fire and Rescue prior to approval of that plan.
So would that come back to committee for discussion?
Apologies, Councillor.
No, that's okay.
It's not intended, but if you were to request it or call it in, then that could be referred to committee. But it's really for Kent Fire and Rescue to comment from a technical fire safety point of view.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, I mean, the previous one that Councillor Thompson was talking about, it did go to appeal, and the council lost hands down. And I think yes, there are slight differences. I was against the one at Cleve Hill purely because of there was only one emergency route in. This has two, and I think to try to refight an argument that we've already lost, if Kent Fire and Rescue are quite happy, they're the experts, and I can't see as, to do the same thing twice would just be a sign of madness in my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. So the recommendation is for approval. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, Councillor Booth.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I won't dwell. I think it's a really well written report by the officer, so I congratulate that. And I'll make a point, Chairman. I know you commented on it earlier. The only reason this is here tonight is because the local war councillors called it in. And with respect to the comment that was passed you, the written word, that is not a good reason, or in my opinion, a valid reason for that to come before committee. So we've wasted 35 minutes on an item that should have been left to delegated powers by officers. That's the first point. Although, I would seek a change to the wording. On page 40, item 11, halfway down that paragraph it states the assessment can be a measurement or a calculation to demonstrate internal levels. I would propose changing that to the assessment will be a measurement to demonstrate internal levels by removing the part or a calculation with respect. because I believe that to be a more appropriate terminology than a calculation as a proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer.
And then I'll come back, Chairman, if I can.
Yeah. Mr Greenwood, is that something that we accommodated? It's been proposed and seconded. I will take it to the, if you want.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay. All those in favour of the proposal? Any against? Abstentions? That's carried.
Thank you, Chairman. And my last final point is on page 42, the archaeological programme of works. Having read that a few times, I think that really amplifies the power of Swale Borough Council with regards to its attitude on archaeological digs and remains within the borough. So I applaud that commentary. Other than that, Chairman, I'm in full support of the application as it stands with the revision that I just made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. There were no proper planning grounds the last time to turn it down. There are no proper planning grounds to turn it down today. Members call applications in for a variety of reasons. There are members of the public out there who actually think elected councillors should make a decision and not paid officers. Now that is no offence to officers or anybody else. I had it donkeys years ago. If I'm going to be turned down, Councillor Harrison, I want it to be by people who've been elected to represent people in the area. Derek obviously can't help that he's ill. Councillor Wise, for all I know, he's letting the train take the strain, and sometimes that can be quite lengthy, isn't it? If indeed he's actually finished work yet. So there are times when members can't physically be present, but it doesn't mean to say that it should be ignored. And as I say, members call things in sometimes at the wish of their residents because residents want elected members to make that decision and not a paid officer. That doesn't mean to say elected members are for or against. It merely means that they are putting something forward for a democratic process. I have no problem with that. And as I say, there are no proper planning grounds to turn this down.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Be very, very brief and bring it back onto the actual planning subject in hand. Councillor Harrison is right, there are no planning grounds, in my opinion, to turn this down. And actually, I think we should welcome an application that's looking to be a relatively positive one on an area of land which is just desolate at the moment, and this serves no purpose really whatsoever. It's not agricultural, it is shrubland. That's never going to be really anything other than that. So I would suggest now I'll call to move to the vote. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. And that is indeed where I shall go. So all those in favour of the officer's recommendation? (13). Those against? 2. 13 to 2. So that is carried. Thank you, members. So we now will move on to agenda item 2.2, 24/500984 full 64 Maleham Gardens, Borden, and call on the officer to give a report.
Thank you, Chair. So there's no update for members on this case, so I'll just move on to a short presentation. So the application seeks planning permission for a loft conversion at the property, which will include the erection of 3 dormers to the front and 2 at the rear, and then also a roof light at the rear, and then the double garage at the property will also be converted to habitable space. So it's a householder application. The dwelling lies within the built-up area boundary of Sittingbourne, within a fairly modern housing estate. It's a 2-storey detached property with a double garage to the side, which is also attached to the neighbouring garage. There's a driveway to the front of the garage which provides parking for 4 cars, and then also a footpath that runs to the west of the dwelling. So here's the existing floor plans. So you've got the ground floor and the first, as well as the garage plan. So it currently has 4 bedrooms on the first floor. And here's the existing elevations of both the property, and then on the right hand side of the screen, that's the garage. So here are the proposed floor plans. There aren't any changes proposed to the ground floor. On the first floor, a staircase will be going in that leads up to the converted loft, which will contain 2 bedrooms, a storage area and a shower room. In the garage that's to be converted, there will be another bedroom with a living area and also a shower room. So in total, that will be 7 bedrooms across the property. Here's the front and rear elevations, which show the dormer windows, which will be small with pitched roofs, and then also the roof light on the rear. And in the garage, the 2 doors on the front will be replaced with windows and bricked up surrounding, and a small window is also proposed on the rear. So I've got some site photos just to show the context of the area. So these 2 just show the dwelling itself and the garage to the side, including the driveway. And then it's the garages with the black doors are the neighbouring properties. It's the garages with the white doors that relate to this application. This just shows the street scene, so we're looking east along Maleham Gardens here. So there's a bit of variety in the properties, different external materials, different features. So for example, in this left-hand photo, the application site is the dwelling roughly centre. On the left-hand side is the neighbour, which features a small gable pitch roof feature, which is comparable to the dormers that are proposed here. And then finally, also looking west along Maleham Gardens to show the surrounding street scene, and then the final photo on the right shows the rear elevation. So just to summarise the committee report, the loft and garage conversions considered to be acceptable. It wouldn't cause significant harm to neighbouring amenity in the opinion of officers. The changes to the property are well designed, and the development, whilst it will result in the loss of the garage, the driveway at the property provides parking for 4 vehicles, which aligns with the required parking provision set out in the adopted parking standards SPD. And on this basis, the officer recommendation is to approve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I will move the officer's recommendation. Councillor Booth second. Thank you very much. Members, Councillor Hunt.
I think as the design is going to match in with the street scene, there's enough parking, and I don't see why there's any reason why if someone wants to do this to their house, they don't go ahead and do it. And the officer's report is right, and I completely agree with it.
Thank you. Aha. I've got a plethora of hands gone up. Councillor Chris Palmer, I think I saw first.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't know this area very well, so at the weekend actually took a drive round, and I must say the photographs do not do justice for the roadways there, because just a short drive round in the afternoon, we met several head-on cars and had to pull to the side, squeeze past, and I think, as far as I'm aware, the regulations advise a minimum of 3 parking spaces for a house of this size. So, as a minimum, I don't think 3 or even 4 parking spaces are enough for a 7-bedded house. Years to come, the kids are going to be teenagers if they've got kids, and they're going to require a lot more parking area than what's available for already on a very narrow road. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Palmer.
Yeah, I was going to say 4 parking spaces isn't sufficient for a 7-bedroomed house. Our parking standard says 3+, but if you was to say, well, we've got a 3-bedroomed house and a 4-bedroomed house, you'll be looking at about 6 to 7 parking spaces. if you look at the photographs of Mayland Gardens, you will see that there are lots of bollards about, so even people can't edge up onto the pavement. And I think that would lead to parking on the highway. I think it would lead to problems on the highway. I have concerns about the number of parking spaces available for such a number of bedrooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Winkles.
Thank you, Chair. My view, I'm afraid, is slightly different to the two previous speakers. I think it's a well-designed application, and yet again, as we so many times on this committee, and I've learnt over the years, perhaps taken on board what other members said in the past on some planning applications. I'm afraid to say, I think if we was to turn this down and they go to appeal, we would lose. So I'm going with the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanagh.
Hi. I understand in the area that there are other houses that have been similarly extended. It's not unattractive. I appreciate people have lots of cars, but this is not a problem just on Mayland Gardens. It's wherever. I don't think we have grounds to refuse it. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Perkin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Kavanagh. I think if the application is compliant with the parking SPD that we have as a council, it would be difficult to argue against that.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. I think, much as I personally have concerns about any time where, and it's too frequent, of converting garages into bedrooms, that is not grounds to refuse on planning, as far as I'm aware. And we cannot surely pick and choose which standards we adopt or don't adopt for a planning application. If our minimum standard says, whether we like it or not, X amount of vehicles for a property of this size, we can't then, sometimes sadly, not say we disregard that, because they'd rightfully go for appeal and win it, because then you're going against your own rules. So I personally think it's a reasonable design. I think the issues are not uncommon to pretty much anywhere in the borough with estates and areas like this, whether it's on the island, whether it's Nyeways, anywhere at all. Moving around estates and areas is difficult. That's not grounds to turn it down. I think we should move and agree it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Yeah, just wanted to clarify a couple of points. The first one, I looked on the portal this afternoon, and on their plans that they submitted on the portal, it only shows 3 parking spaces. So has there been an amended plan?
Thank you, Chair. No, so there hasn't. On their parking, like you say, they've only annotated 3 spaces, but when you measure the driveway itself, it measures, one second, I have got it written down. So it's 5.2 metres in width times 12.2 metres in length, and a standard parking space should just be 2.5 metres by 5 metres. So just by measuring it ourselves, it is capable of providing parking for 4 cars. And I think this photo on the right also shows, you know, at the moment they've got 1 car on there. There is adequate space to the side to provide another, and then there's room to do tandem parking there. So although the plan unhelpfully only shows 3, in line with our standards, which set out, you know, the minimum sizes for spaces, it does accord and provide 4.
And the second point I have, it is a common feature, one that we resisted for quite some time, as I recall, on the planning committee, for turning garages into dwellings. My only concern with this one is, if it's going to be turned into a dwelling, is there some sort of I may have missed it in the report, some sort of condition about soundproofing?
So there's nothing about soundproofing. Obviously, you can see on the floor plan there is living space annotated within that within the garage, but it would only be used ancillary to the main use. There is a condition, number 4, which ensures that the occupants of that conversion must be used in accordance with the main dwelling itself. There isn't anything for soundproofing. If I just go to the site plan, obviously it is attached to the neighbouring garage, but that's in non-habitable space. So I think any noise that could potentially transfer to that other garage through the party wall wouldn't be massively concerning, given it's only used for storage, I imagine, or parking. It's not a habitable room.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I just wanted to add that if this is granted, of course, the applicant would also need to apply for building regulations approval, and that would deal with making sure that any conversion is to the correct standard for residential use. Thank you.
Councillor Booth.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was going to echo what Mr Burns just said. Acoustic matters will be dealt with under building regulations. Again, I'm going to comment, Chairman. The only reason it's here is because the parish council objections, and the objections have all been answered. If you refer to page 49, in all the paragraphs as detailed by the officer. So, yet again, another waste of our time. There's no commentary from the Borough Council. This is a no-brainer. And I've got to say, Chairman, I've heard comments this evening again where people are suggesting they're looking to find reasons to turn it down. That is not the reason to have a planning committee. It is absolutely not a reason to have a planning committee. We are to either endorse the planning professionals' decisions or put forward suitable and appropriate conditions or observations against that. So I think we need to just home in on what we're doing here, and in this instance we are rubber stamping an appropriate decision, recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't disagree with what the officer said about parking for 4 vehicles. I think it's quite obvious that you could get 4 fair-sized family cars on that parking area. But we are looking at 7 bedrooms. And don't forget, when we say we're looking at our planning document, it says guidance. It doesn't say 3+ is a tablet of stone or 3 is this. I think you have to look at the street scene. I think you have to look at the number of bedrooms, and you may have to look at that and say 7 bedrooms is a large house, it'd be a large family, and a number of cars parked outside may be detrimental to the area and may cause problems on the highway. And I don't think we should be saying we've done it in other areas, so we should make it acceptable in all areas. We should learn from mistakes in the past, not keep repeating them. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
No, I agree. I think not from that, but with the agreement of agreeing, in a way, but just wondered, because it could offer a elderly provision in the small unit, which would be quite good, low cost unit. But because it's got a lovely south elevation to the rear, is there any way you can put a condition on for solar on the rear? It just seems a very good opportunity to get that done.
I mean, generally, they haven't proposed it on there, so I don't know if it would be reasonable to impose a condition to require them to, install any sort of solar panels or renewable energy when it's not included in the application. We have to sort of determine it we should be determining it in line with what's proposed and as it stands.
Yeah,
okay,
I agree. We've got the proposal in front of us. I see no more hands going up. So all those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. Those against? 3. So that is approved. And we have nothing else on the agenda this evening, so I call the meeting to a close at 19:54. Thank you, members.